Hello, and welcome back to coverage of the second annual Louisville Cube League Cubevitational. This is the second video out of 5 total, with each video covering one of the drafts of the event, so please keep that in mind if you're trying to watch the whole event in order. If you haven't checked out the other videos in this series, or you just need a refresher, the full summary of the Cubevitational is available in the first video in the series, linked below. Just for a quick recap of standings after the first draft of the event, we have 3 players at 3 wins, Jacob, Bats, and Matt, 3 players at 2 wins, Derek, Bryan, and Scott, Joey with 1 win, and Prose with 0 wins. Today we'll be covering the second draft of the tournament, the Peasant plus Cube draft. Our Peasant plus Cube was put together by Bats and has been maintained by him over the last several years. It follows the typical Peasant Cube rules, only cards that have a common or uncommon printing, with the exception of the Painland cycle. For this cube, all basic lands are considered to be snow-covered for cards that care about that, and there are several sub-themes supported. To see the full list of the cube, you can check out the link on the screen, which is also linked in the comments below. Keep in mind that the version at the link may not be the version that we drafted today, as it could have been updated since this video. With that all being said, let's hop right into today's matches. For commentary today, we've got me, Prose.
Me, Joey.
And I'm Scott.
All right, so this first match is me versus Joey, double commentary match here.
Yes, and I will say I felt very good about this draft. I'm playing a blue-red deck, and I feel like I got all the pieces I wanted from first pick through pick 45. Prose, I don't know how confident you remember feeling, but I remember feeling great about this going in.
Yeah, I felt wonderful about this deck too. It was blue-black spells deck, Rise from the Tides, and I was really excited about it going into the draft. So
yeah, I couldn't remember our games exactly, but I knew we probably had some time at the beginning. Though here's my first overall pick. That is Saheeli, and I think Saheeli is one of the more powerful cards in this cube. Just great at its control element of being able to win you the game on its own as you interact with your opponent.
and that's Saheeli's Sublime Artificer, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Nothing too exciting.
To make the Enclave more impactful play this turn, but
Yeah.
Yeah, seeing your mana a little awkward. Also, perfect spot here for iteration. Presumably going to fit well with a burn spell that I have plenty of. But with it comes into play tapped land, that might not be as easy to do right away. Oh, that Terramorphic Expanse is supposed to be in play, yeah. There we go. It was getting played this turn no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And often I don't feel that it's too big of a need to interact with the Cryptologist right away. I think I saw a Searing Spear in my hand. Like, if I have to wait a couple of turns, I don't mind it looting you through cards, because I think my card quality is high enough that I can interact with you one for one. It's just once it starts putting you ahead on cards that it gets dangerous. And I have the Lightning Bolt anyway to deal with it when you level it up. Okay.
And there's that Hypnotic Grifter.
Hypnotic Grifter, a newer edition. It costs 3 mana to activate, is that right?
Yep. 3 mana to connive.
Very expensive, and I remember specifically in our game when I saw this and didn't yet see what you had black mana for, I was a little afraid because of Cryptologist into this implying maybe a Reanimator outlet. So it kind of threw me off my initial impression that you would be on a more fair deck towards, oh, maybe I could be in danger. And burn spells are definitely less good if you're just trying to bring back a lot of big creatures. Here, I have no understanding of what trick this could represent, so I'm pretty sure I just take the 1.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was even of the mindset that if it was just you activating the Grifter to get in for 2 damage, I actually would be very happy with that result, just getting to untap with Mystic in play. Mystic, similar to Saheeli, just one of my creatures I'm hoping to land before I start interacting.
Yeah, that was purely just to get that Chart a Course without discarding, but
And I had forgotten that there was another thing that put me on thinking you were reanimated. It was the Charter Course follow-up of another way to put something in the graveyard if you wanted it in the graveyard.
Discarded Jetting Glass Kite there, which is kind of surprising to me now.
Well,
Yeah, that's
your opponent has 4 untapped islands, and maybe
Yeah.
you just did not feel good about resolving a 6-mana sorcery.
I was about to
spell.
say that exact thing, that like maybe I just didn't want to just crank it into what was probably counter magic.
and it does imply to me, like it puts the fear in me as your opponent of, oh no, what does he have in his hand
Just
that he's choosing
continuing
to
the
discard
reanimator
back?
trend too for my.
And even
Yeah.
in play, like your opponent's second color is red, right? So it might be kind of hard to like burn that thing down, but fairly easy to like toss like a burst lightning at it and then control magic it, and then you're in a huge world of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think discarding that away in the control mirrors is like the worst thing to do. Not my favorite, but
Yeah, not a lot of action here from me.
Right. Well, we know you must have all action in hand, choosing to discard a spell over a land when you are already on 5.
Yeah, I definitely saw Mind Control in there, Sinister Sabotage. I was just about to say, I wonder if there's any more counter spells left. But I think Mind Control and maybe a Soul Manipulation.
Soul Manipulation, definitely a scary one. Maybe something that justifies discarding the bigger
Yeah.
creature as well. So here I'm letting your counterspell resolve. Getting my bird. And I don't remember if I had anything here, but I think just representing it maybe affects what you choose to do with their surveil, since we're having pretty tight back and forths on resources here.
Looks like we're going for a cruise here.
So just like I was talking about in the early game, just wanting to fight the battles that would put you ahead on resources, not being able to fight for this one does mean I'm now in a little bit of trouble, though. Of note, you have one more land in play than I do. I don't believe I played a land on my last turn. Decent chance you drew a land in those 3, so not really as behind as maybe the card count would inform. And of course, I've got a couple birds left over from the Mystic.
Also, potentially looks a little bit funny delving some things away, but not everything. But I'm fairly certain I left all of the instants in my graveyard that were there, and also that Jetting Glass Kite, presumably for Soul Manipulation, and then the instants for Rise from the Tides. Forced to Fatal Push a bird doesn't feel the best here.
Right. Better to do it on 14, though, than letting yourself get lower. I think by this point, you're able to pretty freely say that I'm not going to put anything else that you're going to regret not having the Fatal Push for.
Deep Analysis still not finding anything interesting enough to play, so.
Well, presumably something interesting enough to not immediately flash it back, so definitely representing something enough to slow me down if I was going to go for anything. But of note, several of my action spells are removal. Like, I can't play Flame Tongue Kavu without you having a creature in play, or Flame Tongue Yearling, or even Prophetic Bolt. I kind of want to wait until I can kill something with it. Terramander leaving those instants and sorceries in the graveyard really powerful.
We're, one top, one bottom on this Read the Bones.
And depending on how many times you have Evolve left up here, it makes it really tricky for me to be able to burn Terramander. So it looks like it's a 2-man. Oh no, you're doing something else.
Yeah,
oh,
no,
no,
it's a 2-mana activation.
So with 2 activations still threatened, I can't interact too favorably with that, I don't believe. But as Scott mentioned, there are a lot of mind control effects in this format. I remember I had at least one, you had at least one. There's persuasion,
Yeah.
right there. So gonna attempt to take your guy who's too big for me to burn. Okay. Retconning, playing a land first. Persuasion gets countered. Seems like I was very particular in trying to leave up red, blue here. Not sure exactly what that represented, but definitely wearing away your counter magic. You're way up on lands from me at this point, but still with a grip full of cards.
Yeah, man, all those turns of drawing no action really added up here. But Ribbons of Night, again, bird isn't your favorite target for that, but it's better than no target.
Right, and at least it's going to recoup you the life and the draw if I let it happen. I think I'm considering killing my own bird to deny you that draw and life.
Yep.
Yep. That's Volcanic Hammer. Just killing that, but then this Rise from the Tide.
Then we rise, yeah.
Did I miss something? Volcanic Hammer's a sorcery.
Is it? Oh, no.
100%.
Oh.
That is my Magic player brain not having... I mean, I've played Magic for a long time. I did not play when that was a card. I just assume all versions of Lightning Strike, Searing Spear. I assume all those cards are
instants. Dude, you said all of that and didn't even bother to name the original card that all of those were based off of in Incinerate.
Incinerate, thank you. Yeah, I assume
That's wild. Now, I'm immediately terrified of how many instant speed Volcanic Hammers you've cast.
Yeah, you have Sulphurous Blast here. Pretty much the perfect Rise from the Tide solution in this cube, I think. There's not a lot that so cleanly deals with that card.
Right, there's just been a couple of Wrath-style effects downshifted to uncommon in very recent years. A couple more very recently. But having Blast here, definitely big, especially since I was trying to get in for some early damage. Here we see... Is it Jetting Glass Kite? Is that the name of the card?
Mm-hmm.
Coming back. Got the Remove Soul for it.
Foretelling a card here. Which, pretty limited options in the cube of foretold cards.
Yes. But this is not a cube I knew the whole list of, though, so I don't think I had too good an idea of what that could be. And here, again, choosing to leave up double... Oh, no. Okay, tapping a little bit differently this time. But Serasphinx, one of my few remaining threats. We've gone through a lot of cards each here.
Now it's my remaining threat.
Yeah, it's pretty rude after you didn't let me take your creature, you taking mine. 4 damage is a lot easier for me to deal, though, than 5. I mentioned Flametongue Kavu before, Flametongue Yearling, similarly. Prophetic Bolt. Lots more ways to deal 4. We saw Flame Slash a little bit earlier.
Psionic Blast, yep. One of those 4s. Taking a little bit of pain back for it, but...
Yeah, me choosing to wait till your beginning of combat there maybe implies that. I mean, you have so much mana; it doesn't really matter when I choose to pick a fight, but definitely implies I might have had some kind of follow up if it hadn't worked.
Just counting my deck there. We've drawn a lot of cards this game, and it's getting a little bit thin. I'm not sure what the exact count is, but I'm fairly certain it's under 10 at best. But
Right, I mentioned me being out of threats, but there's a chance that we've just worn each other fully out in that regard.
yeah, there's not a lot of action left in my pile here. I believe you're counting to see how many lands I have left to draw, presumably. But
right, because I know what's left in my deck, so I'm like, how many more spells do I have to fight through? And I think this is definitely a scary one, but
yes,
I believe it draws you a card.
At the beginning of my upkeep, at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card unless target opponent sacrifices a creature or pays 3 life. Yeah, so.
Searing Spear is an instant.
Yeah, Searing Spear is an instant and takes care of it.
Can't confirm.
I don't even know how many times I've cast Volcanic Hammer either, because, again, I just read them all as the same card.
As someone who didn't watch this match live, the story of this first game strikes me as Prose having most of the muscle here. He's like recurring his threats somewhat. He's got clean answers to yours in like hard removal, whereas Joey's got like fungible kind of like 2 damage here, 3 damage there kind of stuff.
Right, I mentioned how
it's out, but if I were a betting man, I would put money on Prose to take the match here.
Yeah, Rise from the Tide specifically is very scary for me. I am thankful as this game has gone on that he wasn't reanimated. Like I mentioned, all my little burn spells definitely much worse against bigger creatures, as you're pointing out. But Rise from the Tide feels like the only like knockout card in the matchup. Soul Manipulation is also a scary one, though.
Yeah, but you know that's tempered a bit by the fact that you have Sulphurous Blast, right? And Rise from the Tide isn't the quickest card to come into play, so there's plenty of time to find it. Do what?
And knowing that he has Sulphurous Blast is critical because you can just set up an end game where you have Rise and like 2 or 3 counters up. Even post that. I mean, Sulphurous Blast is an instant, so it's you know, obviously there's game to play here, but I feel like you have the trump to his trump, and given perfect play on both sides, I think your deck is stronger.
So here I'm targeting Expressive Iteration to get back. That tells me that I don't feel like I have it locked up through what your remaining threats could be. Like I'm still digging for just raw number of cards at this point, because if I just wanted one good spell, there's plenty of like a counter spell, a removal spell that I could get back from the graveyard. So Expressive Iteration just trying to put me up on cards. Though I believe 2 of the things we saw were lands.
Yeah, Tolarian Terror finally shows up and meets a counter spell.
Essence Scatter completing my pair with Remove Soul that we saw earlier.
I believe, looking here, that was the last of the cards that allowed me to win this game, so I would not be surprised to see this go to a second game quickly here.
Right, it looks like maybe only 2 cards left in the library. Yeah, there we go. Okay. After what I'm sure was extensive shuffling, we went back for game 2.
Yeah, I mean, at least on my end, there was some reasonable amount of sideboarding as well. There were a lot of those hard removal spells that don't necessarily feel like they have a home in this matchup as much. I'm pretty sure I ended that game with like 4 removal spells in hand, so. Actually, Cryptologist actually on time this game. Incredible. Going the aggro route here, I see.
Yeah, I also had a bit of. I had a lot of sideboard slots to switch out, so I had a lot of things that made goblin tokens. I had Krenko's Command. I also had the 2-drop goblin that makes a goblin, and the 4-drop goblin who makes a goblin. Beetleback Chief is, I believe, the name of the card. So, seeing how much 1-for-1 removal, as you were just speaking to, you had, I was very interested in just trying to beat it in terms of efficiency. We saw you have to spend 2 removal spells on the 2 bird tokens last game, for example.
Mm-hmm.
One extra note I want to point out about the last game, because I just remembered it as that game ended and I was looking over the decks again. I remember specifically in our game 1, I was doing some math each turn on the draws and how deep I wanted to go with my own draw spells, because deep analysis does say target player.
Right.
And wanting to not get myself just by forgetting that. Couldn't remember for sure which game that was, but as the game progressed, I
Yeah.
became more certain.
Kept both of them with Read the Bones.
Yeah, so that's a bit of life loss plus these goblin attacks. So starting to get in for some good chip damage. And again, me playing the red version of the control deck means I have some burn that can be the last little bit of damage needed. So every point I'm able to get in early here definitely feels important.
Missed an attack there. I'm not really sure what the deal was, because I don't think there was ever a world where I was blocking, so...
Yeah, it looks like we're still a couple of cards away from being able to evolve, or just have a very expensive evolve next turn.
Getting expressive back there is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we've both played several cards that just put us up cards. Read the Bones on your side, my iteration, Archaeomancer, and iteration again. I guess even the Krenko's Command to a lesser extent, increasing value per card.
I have to assume that 1, 2, 3, yeah.
You have
So we have
plenty
the
for the
mana
evolve,
for the evolve now, yeah.
but you don't have enough for multiple activations. So I think actually this attack is still fairly face up and obvious, because if you were to try to activate again, it's very likely I kill it in response. So there's a chance that it was another time when you were supposed to make the attack, as we see play out here, where you just decide to take the damage.
Snuff out there. Do a little more self burn.
I'm surprised that you didn't have enough for an end of turn evolve there.
I believe,
especially after the snuff out.
2 of those cards are a basic land and the Enclave Cryptologist.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's still 1 short. I couldn't remember what the other card was, but yeah, there's Swamp and an Enclave Cryptologist.
I do think it is a slight error to end step that snuff out there, because you really gain nothing.
Yeah.
Or you lose nothing by waiting to your main phase. You just get to draw an extra card and see a little more info. But not a terrible thing, just something I wanted to point out.
Here's that expressive iteration that we knew about.
Tolarian Terror certainly made this board seem a little bit more under control, but we are already at 8 life, which is unfortunate, knowing that we're staring down, Volcanic Hammer, Psionic Blast, Searing Spear.
On the bright side, I'll definitely cast this turn at effectively sorcery speed.
Sulphurous Blast and Lightning Bolt as well, yeah. Just a lot of...
Yeah, I mentioned last game a couple of different 4 damage spells. So the fact that I don't choose to get in with a goblin there just for 1 point of damage, being willing to sacrifice the other to turn on more of the 3 damage ones, I think is I don't know if it's a sign of strength or necessarily, but definitely
Well, I
don't
don't
feel like
think
I have to get every damage.
there was no way for you to actually do 4 damage to that guy last turn, right? You only had 2 mana, and he has
Right,
ward.
I more so mean dealing 1 to you to turn on
sure,
more
yeah.
3 plus 4 combinations.
Okay, yeah.
Here's where I learned that that card has Ward 2. And another creature that is hard to target with things, but being tapped out for that, if I have my other control magic effect, if I have the Persuasion, definitely get to make a big swing here. Or just a couple of burn spells.
Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on in my hand here, because playing this seems weird. It might have just been the fact that I'd been waiting to cast it all game and finally hit the 6th land, but...
Yeah, it turns off my attack. You only have 2 other cards in hand. The fact that I cast control magic last turn into so much open mana implies that I'm not like... that I don't feel the need to hold back and wait for you to tap out, so...
Also, you know, as we've been saying, Joey's deck is scary from this point. You know, if you just sit and wait around, eventually he's just going to have enough burn to kill you. So you gotta get the board under control, and you gotta try and get a win before that happens.
So we're cruising again, it looks like. Or no, angler. Instead, fish. That gets countered.
Yeah. Angler, a scary card. 5 toughness. Again, just the scary amount. Just continuing to take draws, hoping to find the burn to finish him off, or my Persuasion, or some card draw myself. So this is that Persuasion, paying the 2.
We're looking at soul manipulation and another card that presumably doesn't counter persuasion. Yeah.
It looks. It might be the demon.
Could be, yeah.
So this is getting back the angler.
Raise dead mode, not really optimal for that card.
No.
Definitely feeling the squeeze here.
Little baby rise from the tides, I think just 5. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know that's real pressure.
I think I said out loud here, they come into play tapped, and like felt like insanely ahead, and like I don't remember exactly, but I think that I have a lot of pressure this turn if I have anything in hand.
Yeah, I mean, even just sending me to 6 here is a pretty rough spot to be in. Even if they do get to untap next turn, it's not like they can very cleanly deal with Tolarian Terror.
Right, and my life total wasn't being pressured, so not like I'm in any danger there either. Looks like I've got 2 cards, 3 cards. Haven't seen that much burn this game. Very believable that I have a card if you took 6, so instead just going to take 2. Me not casting anything when you're tapped out, though, implies I might not have much, actually.
That's I don't remember.
That's the Prowess Merfolk who gets back a card?
Yeah, I was going to say, he brings back an instant or sorcery for sure. And then
But
feeling a bit
Soul.
pressured to work on the life total here, which I think ultimately ends up being my downfall. Because this is now not enough creatures.
So playing Saheeli first, and usually I don't have a good creature in play to turn the servos into, but now having this Tolarian Terror...
A pretty good one, yeah.
Normally Saheeli just stays at 5, but I think...
So chart a course here, trying to find something.
Anything. Yeah, just anything that will do anything, but I'm not sure that there's a card in this cube that gets you out of this one.
Right, like Ribbons of Night gaining 4 maybe buys you another turn to look for something else, but...
Murderous Cut, Go for the Throat, Poison the Cup all deal with the terror right now, which doesn't fix the problem, but it makes it a lot easier, although it looks like I foretold the Poison the Cup, which I'm not really sure of.
Well, you only had 1 black mana, and that card costs 2 black, doesn't it?
Oh, if I wanted to cast Angler as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Although
it makes sense to want to cast the Angler. Also, you wouldn't have been able to pay the Ward, depending on what else you had done this turn.
I mean, it costs 2 to foretell, right? So that's plus the Ward 2. And if I don't cast the Angler. If you don't cast the Angler and you get the 2 mana back from foretelling, that's 5. But yeah, we're just going to kill the attempted copy.
It's on top, so you like what you saw.
Yeah, any non-creature spell here feels good.
What about 3 creatures?
Probably still feels good.
Yeah. Really just need to get an artifact. Oh, Deep Analysis left on top. Probably not flashing that one back, but...
Yeah, I mean, I was Empty Grip here. And having that felt better than having whatever the 1 card below it would be, so... Oh, it was Deep Analysis, Treasure Cruise, okay.
Okay. So if I have an instant on your end of turn, I think that's lethal. Almost like any instant. That's definitely lethal.
It's an instant, yeah. Yep.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we had to go through the motions, if there was something that maybe could happen, but...
No.
Yeah.
I think that turn that I attacked with zombies, I think that was kind of the turn that scuffed it, because letting you attack with the Tolarian Terror that turn kind of throws the whole thing off. But yeah, I don't know, that turn where I cast the Angler, I think was weird. I don't know. I think it would have been better to just deal with the Terror at that point. I guess you lose the Scry if you don't foretell, which maybe was the thought there if I was going Hellbent, but
I forgot that the Scry was tied to the foretell.
Is probably a consideration, but I don't know. It's easy for me to say. So yeah, I ended up 1-3, I believe, in this draft. Yep.
This was my rallying draft. I went 3-1, losing only to Scott, who we'll see here in just a moment, but managing to beat Prose, Derek, and Jacob, who we'll see later on. So we're here with Derek and Matt's match. As has come up before, I believe Matt and Derek are both very hasty players, so we'll see how things go as they start slinging spells, but I don't expect this one to be as calm as the match between Prose and I, even though Matt is on a very similar deck to the one I was on.
Yeah, these cards are going to be flying around quickly, but Derek is playing a sort of a black-red kind of sacrifice, make a bunch of tokens, do some things with those. He's got some good value in Hymnoturok, some bird spells, very aggressive, very synergy-based gameplay.
Mm-hmm. Matt's deck is very similar to what we just saw out of me. A bunch of blue-red controlling cards, some counter magic, some burn. Young Pyromancer is his token producer off of that. And Sicarian Infiltrators, a Warhammer card that works really well in this archetype, having flash so you can and wait until you can take a turn off from interacting with your opponent, and then just drawing a few cards, making a few dudes. We saw Derek, though, this game threatening to attack for 4 on turn 2 off of that Bone Splitter that got countered. So definitely a lot of pressure.
Regicide, I believe, was Jund colors for Derek in this draft, so fortunate for him that it appears a majority of Matt's creatures are red, so...
Yeah, it looks like
Yes.
Matt's take on this archetype is more aggressive than Joey's was. Joey opted for like a control kind of counter burn strategy where Matt has some lower drop creatures.
Right. I mean, I definitely would have loved Young Pyromancer and Deathrite, or Dragon Rage's Channeler if I had seen it, but I, as I mentioned, had opened Saheeli and had a couple of follow-ups. Here's that Sicarian Infiltrator that I mentioned earlier, just giving us a bit of value, drawing a couple of cards and threatening to block and trade with the skeleton.
Derek's creature there is a Stormclaw Rager also. Well, Derek's
A
former creature.
newer card that I've been really impressed with so far, especially in this cube. The couple of times I've seen it, it's been pretty scary, but gets taken care of here, leaving just the skeleton. And a show of strength from Matt that he doesn't even want to leave back one of the infiltrators to trade with it. I don't think Derek's that close to being able to bring it online, as Matt has a lot of control over when creatures die. So
Derek's draw feeling a bit anemic, maybe 1 or 2 too many lands drawn in the early game here. Really getting anything in the way of early pressure, and Matt is just kind of running away with it here.
Yeah, we got the famous play your third extra land after Mana Leak resolves play there from Derek.
Oh, unfortunate.
Yeah.
Not sure how much Hissing Iguana would do against the infiltrators threatening to provide a lot of blocks, but overall, still unfortunate to see. Meanwhile, Matt's gotten a fair amount of value off of the infiltrators, Boilerworks, putting him essentially up a card, and now, which draw spell is that? I don't recognize that art, but it's
Thirst
one
for
of the draw
Knowledge.
threes, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Here,
Dragon fodder here from Derek.
yep. I mentioned having a lot of the double goblin cards. Here's, I think, the last one.
Shower of coals from Matt. Man, that is gonna...
Brutal. Definitely with Threshold, I imagine. So this is 4 damage, wiping out just the goblins, dealing them 4.
Matt jumping the gun a bit, showing his Fire Blast, but Derek's still in it, able to stem the bleeding somewhat. But knowing about that Fire Blast is, it doesn't feel like Derek has a lot of ways back into this game from this point.
Right, wasn't exactly sure at what point of combat we were in there. Looks like just before damage. And this is Remand, so replaying it, but taking 1 damage off the replay thanks to Sulphur Springs. 1 point definitely could matter here, especially now that we know about the Fire Blast. Assume we might just see Fire Blast hardcast this turn.
Whoa.
Yeah, Jilt
Okay.
is... Yeah, gonna
Too much tempo.
bring that one home.
Jilt's one of my personal favorite cards in this cube.
Yeah.
The skeleton essentially never dealt with that game. Turn 1 skeleton attack you almost every turn and just ends up not mattering. We're already in game 2. I didn't even notice we weren't still shuffling.
Blood Fountain from Derek. Monastery Swiftspear from Matt before Derek had even taken his damage from his pain land.
It's honestly very polite of Matt to play that quickly because you don't even have to put your pen down. You can just write 1 from your Sulphur Springs and 1 more.
That's true. Yeah, he's just being efficient at that point. But then immediately throwing all that efficiency out of the window by walking away from the table. So
I don't know if that was getting the blood token
it might
we
have been
needed,
getting the blood token. Yeah.
or getting some other kind of token. But usually, if we see someone get up from the table, it's because of a token that was missed. Not familiar with what that creature is. I think it's the one of the prowess ones, but doesn't matter because it's dead now anyway.
Yeah.
And that's definitely an issue. I remember when I played against Derek, that card was an issue for me. And like I said, Matt's on a very similar deck, just hard to get value against.
Those were
Gonna
his
get
only tips at the moment, though, so not particularly terrifying.
right.
So,
I mean, still good enough to block maybe, and left behind a satyr after being dealt with. But you're right, not as scary as it can be in some situations. Though that satyr now turns into a draw and a +1 counter on this creature, hopefully making it more resilient. But were we already at threshold?
Matt never stopping. That was Incinerate.
Oh, okay, my mistake. I had thought that was Shower of Coals again, or the card that
Yeah,
deals
that's
4.
correct. Shower of Coals.
Okay.
On Crop Crasher gonna rumble. Yep.
Yeah, not the ideal matchup for that one. Derek's deck not too well set up to take advantage of it. I guess exerting a creature and then being able to sacrifice it is a little bit of synergy, but overall not the deck you normally would find that card in. So Derek might have been short a card or two in deck building, seeing that one.
Matt taking his foot off the gas momentarily to draw 3 cards. Shows a swamp, which is an interesting splash we did not see in game 1.
Right, considering discarding it, but instead keeps it to play.
Not having an artifact for that Thirst Knowledge meant it wasn't quite as backbreaking, but he still feels quite far ahead at the moment. Although really only one question on the table to answer.
I will share the Black Splash is very light. That one swamp and an Evolving Wilds to go get it are our only black sources. I'll leave it until we maybe see the black spell, exactly what it is that we're making that splash for, but it's not a huge commitment within the mana base, just one swamp really. Here, just going up on cards again. Discarding Mana Leak, didn't have the mana to cast it this turn anyway. Derek going up on cards fountain as well, yeah. Cashing in the Blood Fountain. Here we see Anat off of the bounce land, and then
Careful consideration just hanging out as a permanent, I guess.
As it's known to do.
There we go.
There it goes. Or no, sorry, it was On Crop Crasher who went away.
Yeah, we responded to the annex so that it didn't yield a Satyr token when it died.
Gotcha. Brutal shower of coals here as Anats plus the Berserker were threatening to get a nice little bit of value if Derek had another red creature. But still getting a couple of satyrs here. Ooh.
Warhammer changes the math here quite a lot.
Yeah, it goes from 4 to 7 damage, so it's lethal next turn if Matt doesn't have a follow-up, and he doesn't. So here, getting into game
just immediately
3,
into game 3.
Derek,
all gas, no brakes.
Derek just not even moving his deck into position before drawing and keeping. So Matt, as Scott pointed out, does have several aggressive elements. It's hard to get the Battlecry Goblin's ability online. I believe it takes 6 power, is that right?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So we haven't seen him get up to that amount too much, but if he's got another creature follow up with, maybe he could get up to that level.
So that's the same creature that showed up the last game. That is Kenris Spell Spear, since it appears to stay in play for more than 10 seconds now. Trample Prowess 2/2, one of the March of the Machine transforming creatures.
Ah. I think it was
I spoke too soon.
I think it was maybe even a different prowess creature last game, but I mean we saw several of them so far, so I might be getting confused as well. Matt drawing his splash color again. Maybe we'll get to see what he's splashing for here.
Synthesizer.
So Derek drawing a good amount of his value cards, just
Like regicide once more.
getting ahead a little bit on cards.
We see the first kind of payoff for the sacrifice plan that Derek's
Right.
enacted here.
Berserker definitely a little bit of a payoff, but Cutthroat can really amp that up as well.
Oh sure.
Finally lands one too. We've seen Hissing Iguanar and Blood Artist both get countered.
Right, no creatures really seem to stick around that long in the matchup. I mean, both players playing red, even though we saw a fair amount of removal in our first match, there is a lot of removal in this cube. Very interactive, allows you to have a lot of these grindy back and forth games. Really, I think the strength of the lower power level cubes.
Gifted Aetherborn and Annex were, I believe, the plays that turn.
Yeah, that seems correct. So Matt's still on the back foot here. Even after some good plays. Just has another prowess 2/2. And looks like one card in hand.
Yeah, he's low despite casting.
Like we had pointed out early game, Derek cashed in a couple of cards for value, so he's been up on cards kind of the whole time. Here, getting to trade in one of the goblins to kill the Swift Spear, also getting value when it dies off of the Cutthroat.
The Cutthroat's gone.
Oh, the Cutthroat is gone. Missed when it disappeared, just assumed it was one of the mini cards hiding on Derek's side of the board.
But still able to come in for a sizable chunk here. Gifted Aetherborn getting to it Kraken at least once is a huge game in this kind of swingy back and forth matchup. And Matt seems unable to do much of anything. Passing back with all his mana untapped.
Right. Not necessarily a sign of weakness from his deck, especially with a prowess creature in play. Maybe it spooks off a couple of attacks, knowing that that creature could get bigger. But Derek, happy to take the value of cracking the egg, casting Dark Dweller Oracle, so another creature that would allow him to sacrifice.
Yeah, I was going to say, knowing what I know about Derek, I expected most, if not all, of his creatures to hit the red zone this turn.
I was just about to say we forgot about the knight, but
around much. He jams and throws his cards and sees what happens. And so Matt just has a symbol 1/1 removal spell, blocks to soak up some damage, and then sacks his creature, so no life is gained on Derek's side. But is essentially on one card and no board against Derek's board full of little idiots. So again, Joey had the Sulphurous Blast, and Matt has shown Shower of Coals, which has some comeback potential, but it doesn't even clear up the bulk of this board.
Right, and I think...
Oh, there it is.
But Dark Dweller at least lets us get value off of one of those creatures, I think, right? Or no?
Sling Gang.
Sling Gang.
Them, yeah.
Sling Gang, a better use of it than the Dark Dweller Oracle. I also wasn't super confident that Dark Dweller Oracle was worded in such a way that would be good for him, but Yeah. So Derek manages to take that one, just winning the resource battle against Matt's slightly more controlling tempo deck. Very impressive there. I don't know if any of those goblins were a sideboard plan. I assume since he's a sacrifice deck, they were all probably in the main deck. But
Yeah, it looks like most of those cards were in his original deck. So
okay,
Yeah, and not to be deterred, Matt took that one loss and then swept up the rest of his matches and finished 3-1, whereas Derek only managed a 2-2 with quite an impressive looking deck.
right, definitely looked strong there. Lots of different pieces, though. Understandable how it could falter, especially again when there is a lot of removal in the format. I remember my match against Derek was just killing the creatures that mattered, and then the little 1/1s not being able to make that much of a difference. So here we get into Bryan and Scott's game. Bryan was on a mono white deck. His creatures don't provide the greatest of top ends. However, he has some non-creature spells that can really help him to close out a game. We might see a couple of those here. Scott, what did you have going on your side?
So I'm branching out a little bit. I typically stick to either aggressive red strategies or kind of blue X control things, like we've seen so far in this draft. But those were clearly pretty heavily drafted, and I opted for sort of a green black mid range kind of reanimator value kind of strategy. So that's
Gotcha.
what I'm trying.
So even though we see two blue sources from you here, they're not really here as blue sources.
Correct. I'm actually splashing a draw spell and a battle, and that's about it.
Are those just cards, if you recall, that you picked up early in the draft and were good enough to play, or were they cards you actively wanted and were worth going out of the way for?
With these kind of strategies, at least the way that I've seen them as others drafted, the fixing is pretty plentiful. So I did not mind branching out for just some utility that I didn't have access to in my main two colors.
Right. It looks like, if I'm not misreading that, that's a Simic Signet in your hand as well as an Astrolabe. So the splash definitely looks pretty free for you.
Yeah, and I have a host of non-basics as well. This cube is really built with fixing and interaction in mind, so I'm leaning on that pretty heavily.
Hmm. Right. We've seen a couple of very interactive games so far. Brian's playing the deck that most wants to be interacted with. I actually think I am looking at the wrong list of Brian's deck because the list I'm looking at does not have Tide Hollow Scuttler in it. So I might be just as surprised as everyone else is to see what comes out in this game.
Oh, interesting. I should note that we play this cube where all the basics were just acting as if they're snow covered. The cube owner just prefers this art style, so no need. We're all playing friendly games. We don't need to specifically have snow covered basics to make these cards go. So
Here we see Wall of Omens for Brian, so a little more value focused of a deck, it looks like, than I was initially describing. Yeah, I found the correct list now. He was actually on a more fair Esper deck, it looks
yeah, it looks like
like.
some blink strategies and a crystal shard at the centerpiece of this build.
Yeah, so definitely more value focused. Having Wall of Omens feels like one of the main champions of blink strategies across all formats. So already something worth blinking if we get one of our blink effects in play here.
Yeah, and obviously I don't know that that's what my opponent's doing yet, but I'm kind of flooded here. I just have all mana sources and little cantrips in place, so not much action on my end at the moment.
And that looks like it's maybe Mimeomancer. So again, more value. So far, Brian's plays have drawn him a card, taken a card out of your hand, and tutored a card. So just all +1s over here, just churning through the deck, finding value.
Yeah, so he's added a Swords to Plowshares whose hand, which is quite effective against the top end of my deck. I have things like Penumbra Worm as my top end, so getting that exiled is definitely not the outcome I would like for that card.
And normally I'd say him searching it up this early on, maybe you could trick him into using it on something else to leave you more open later on. But the early Tide Hollow Sculler, he has seen that Penumbra Worm already, I believe. So knowing that that could come down next turn, unlikely that you would be able to get him to use the sword on much else.
Yeah, and that is one of the benefits of this strategy. Like we are not locked into reanimating our big things. I keep saying we. I frequently will hardcast them in games with this strategy.
Right. The signets and the bounce lands definitely allowing you to get up to a good amount of mana here. Circuit Mender, more value. It looked like there was a momentary blink in the hand, so I would not be surprised to see that on your instep. Not much reason for Bryan to need to fire it off now, and definitely a decent incentive to want to leave it up, but I think this is Portable Hole.
Yeah, Portable Hole.
And taking one of the signets. So really like this play, slowing you down. Again, he knows your hand and probably looking at if you decide to tap out for the worm, not even that big of a deal for him.
So here I show up with a different worm. This one, getting swords, is going to buy me a ton of time because it gains life when it enters the battlefield as well. But his response is instead to blink his Mimeomancer. And I missed what he tutored for.
He got, I believe that's Dispatch, the Metalcraft Swords to Plowshares, effectively. And that's what we're going to see here to exile the worm, allowing him to get in for, it looks like 8, if I'm not mistaken. So not quite a 2-turn clock, but he's got the mana up to flash back Momentary Blink and cast Swords, so still a good amount of engine spinning for him. Not like he's got to rush too much to try to finish this off yet.
Yeah, and I'm just looking for cards that can stabilize this, and his clock is pretty anemic, but it's hard to interact with given all his removal and blink effects that are just sitting face up.
And I think actually that I misspoke. I think that is the worm we saw at the start of the game, so might not have another worm, might not know that there's another worm, but...
Yeah, so
yeah, it looks like that's the case.
I play a Chupacabra attempting to kill his Tide Hollow Sculler, mostly as a way to get this blink out of the graveyard because I still end up with a 2/2. I can trade for it later. So I temporarily get my one reanimate spell back. It meets another one, and he decides to take the first one and put it back onto the Sculler.
Diabolic Servitude, not the easiest card to comprehend with its original wording.
It's weird.
Bryan's exiling removal, though, very effective at stopping the same large creatures from coming back, at least, though.
Yeah, so Bryan did not want to give me the trade with the Sculler, so I instead opt for another one just to stem the bleeding here.
But I assume we're going to see an end-of-turn mannequin back Chupacabra.
Absolutely.
So maybe after seeing no gas in your hand, I maybe would have been interested in using the swords. I don't know how much other removal he has in his deck, but using the swords on the Chupacabra to prevent this line definitely seems like it could have been valuable. Here we're just using a die to represent a mannequin counter, remembering that if that gets countered or gets targeted, it's going to go away.
I just have another land here, so I'm going to go ahead and fire off the Servitude just to draw a new card. Hopefully a card that does anything is the plan.
And did you have a large number of, you mentioned your reanimator strategy, did you have a large number of large creatures that you're hoping to draw here, or were there only a few after that worm's gone?
I had the aforementioned Penumbra Worm, I had a Palaka Worm, I had a Croson Tusker, which is not the most exciting reanimator target, but just a good little piece of value, and I had
Right.
a Meteor Golem as well. So not an overwhelming amount, but I have some range here.
Here, it looks like he's counting mana, but also was counting his artifact for a moment there because he has affinity on this creature that's going to cascade into a Flicker Wisp. So more value, but definitely Scott untapping with a scary amount of mana here.
Yeah, so Brian's going to take a minute to crunch on Diabolic Servitude and then make a pretty cool play here of blinking Diabolic Servitude, which exiles the elf attached to it and then leaves it with no targets when it comes back into play.
That is a very heads-up play. I assumed we were just going for the Circuit Mender.
Yeah.
Very cool to see. I guess Chupacabra also an interesting option since it has that mannequin counter on it, though it's not a very effective blocker against our air force that we're attacking with here.
Yeah, and this Air Force is pretty scary. I don't have a ton of ways to interact with it outside of just one removal, and my hand is pretty clearly blank at the moment. So
yeah, 2 lethal threats for next turn means Brian's got a good advantage. Not sure what there is that you could draw another lethal threat in the air.
I'm pretty sure this is draw card and concede. Thinking a little bit.
I think you're probably just reading all the text on Dreg Mangler.
Is that the card in hand? I thought maybe it was the -2/-2 gain 2. The card from Ipsilon. Couldn't quite tell, but
Not sure.
either way, wasn't enough, and we're on to game 2.
Yeah, Brian spent that first game presenting a lot of difficult to answer questions, and my deck coughed up a lot of lands and mana sources in response.
Mm-hmm.
We just exchanged 1-drop artifacts here. Nothing too exciting.
You got to draw a card from yours though, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy about the trade, especially given the mana requirements of my deck not being super strict and the amount of fixing I have being pretty high. So,
Right, not in love with the use of Portable Hole there, but maybe hoping to catch you off of the right colors.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can imagine hands where that, could be backbreaking. So maybe it's just worth the.
True, we just saw so
risk.
much
Yeah.
fitzing from Scott last game that it's definitely less interesting.
All right, Invasion of Amonkhet.
I also, in favor of the Portable Hole play, he did show an affinity creature and a dispatch, and I did not have a ton of high value Portable Hole hits. Like, he used it in the first game to get a Signet, and this is fairly similar.
That's a very good point.
Right.
The affinity angle, especially with a Chalice follow-up, if he has that big affinity creature, he's not even that far away from casting it already. As we see Marsh Flitter here coming with a couple of goblins. So
Coming to defend this battle.
Yeah, not super likely that this battle is going to get ticked down anytime soon, though Looter could slowly work away at it.
I don't know that attacking a battle for 4 turns with Looter is where you want to be.
No, definitely not excited about that.
Oh, and that was Underground River last turn for the Marsh Flitter. I see. I knew Brian had one basic swamp in this list, but we see Crumbling Necropolis and Underground River to help with that splash.
Brian really just adding all the permanents to the board.
Yeah, Miss Meadow Witch, interesting there, but
Miss Meadow Witch would have taken over this game very quickly had it not been dealt with. So good to see it go away there. Means we have some games still to play. Brian presumably checking to make sure this won't trigger when it attacks your battle. and as a result, just ends up hitting Bryan. So if we could put a large creature into play this turn, could start to battle back, though there's already a Death Touch creature on Bryan's side of the board.
Thinking a little bit on the discard here, and I go with some large idiot.
That's the Dusk Mangler.
We're going to float black and play bounce land. Follow up with a compulsive research.
Good sequencing. We saw the other draw threes in Matt and my decks already. The bounce lands providing a lot of value, having those in your deck, even if it's something like Thirst for Knowledge. Often just having the extra lands to be able to discard is nice, even if you don't get the full value off of what compulsive research is. But here, coming in for, it looks like just 4 damage, a bunch of 1 toughness creature or 1 power creatures.
Yeah, not the scariest clock, but passing with untapped mana is a little worrying given all the interaction he showed. I'm having a little trouble getting anything going here. I'm just sort of fiddling around with, signets and draw spells. But here, my first real play of the game, just the Palaka Worm again. Kind of undoing all of his earlier clocking, and now I'm coming after that battle, so maybe I'm getting a little bit going here.
Interesting choice to come after the battle here, though.
Well, I think that means my hand is great.
Fair. Just hard to imagine that it gets dealt damage 3 in increments of 3, but
well, I mean,
definitely possible.
With Palaka Worm on the board, he's representing lethal to it next turn, right?
Sure.
So,
I don't know how much the 1 damage makes a difference there.
Well, I guess if he chump blocked with everything, it would trample over 3 at this point, right? Or is that thing a 1? That thing's a 1/2. Never mind.
It's a 1/2.
But Bryan's removal was swords, so like I was mentioning in game 1, that's just a huge life swing, and I have lots more time to work through things at the moment. Whether or not my plan was to just attack that battle 4 turns in a row, I guess I did not want to loot my cards away. It's hard to say in retrospect, but...
Of note, even though we see 2 red lands in play here for Bryan, it does not look like he has anything off of that red splash. These are just blue-black and white-black lands that he's playing. No extra value off of the red there.
All right, the sword's out of the way, so now it's the real star of the show. Penumbra Worm. And I'm still coming after that battle, proving Joey a fool once more.
I mean, you'll definitely get to hit it 2 more times. Whether or not that's greater than the value of looting 4 times, even when it flips, I won't be convinced.
Truth be told, we're so far away from this event, I don't even remember what the backside of this battle does, so...
It comes into play as a copy of a creature in a graveyard.
Yes, it's very good in your deck.
Yeah.
Wow, there you go.
Which currently I believe Dusk Mangler is your best target, maybe Phantom Centaur, but I kind of doubt it.
Interesting. Bryan, maybe a little flustered here, choosing to sacrifice a goblin, not loving that play.
I don't love that goblin tokens are still in the graveyard.
He heard you.
Thanks, Bryan.
I think every time Bryan has picked up that battle, it's gotten progressively further off the screen when he puts it back down.
Yeah, so many permanents, man.
That's true, yeah.
There's only so much room on the playmat. All right, let's get this battle dead.
So he would have to... It has 2 counters left on it, right?
There's two
block
counters.
With 5 toughness to prevent it from flipping.
Well, the awkward part is we don't want to kill Penumbra Worm if it's going to flip. So I'm pretty sure the correct thing here is just no blocks.
Brian disagrees.
This doesn't feel like a winning line to me, but
Man, I don't know. I mean, even just getting Duskmangler into play is kind of a beating from here.
that's true. I just don't think Bryan has a chance of winning before it flips.
Yeah.
Just quick note here: the owner of this cube does not have all the correct tokens. This is not me being lazy. He just simply didn't have it. So now I have a bear.
Okay, and the token on Bryan's side is the Aftermath Spirit from the...
Importantly, Bryan only has
creature.
one card left in hand, so maybe he was just valuing the discard part of the Duskmangler pretty highly there. Didn't
Oh
quite
my
see what
goodness.
it was, but yeah.
This is kind of the plan I wanted to enact when I set about the strategy, so I'm pretty happy to see it at least once.
Is that Artisan? Is that the name of
Yeah,
that
Artisan
card,
of
right?
Kozilek.
Bringing back the Mangler. This game feels completely out of reach now.
Brian's got a dispatch with 2 artifacts, though.
Yeah.
Scott, the hero, pointing out there at the last moment before Bryan picked up all the cards that was his Astrolabe. Definitely the one danger of Cube. Everyone's cards are sleeved the same. Cards can get mixed up if people are slinging too fast.
Well, just don't take people's cards. It's rude.
It's funny you mentioned that. I normally will, if my opponent Oblivion Rings or similar one of my cards, I usually just put it in my exile zone because I am pretty good at tracking what is where and why, and I like to avoid those situations. I don't know why I was slacking in this.
I think Bryan might have grabbed it just to be very clear and represent the game. Pretty sure that's what happened with the Tide Hollow game 1 at least.
Sure, I guess on camera that is more important.
Here we see Wall of Omens. So it feels like from watching those first 2 games, if Bryan's not able to get some pressure down early, the end game from Scott definitely feels stronger.
Yeah, and in that vein, missing his land drop on that turn, even after casting Wall of Omens, feels probably not great.
Yeah, and I have Cultivate and a blue signet, so my colors are pretty well set up and pretty hard to interact with. In addition,
And a bounce land, so we know you have your next 2 land drops already locked up in hand. So
some real original Ravnica kind of stuff right now. I'm loving it. This is me in my element. I could not be happier at this moment.
yeah, guaranteed the mana to get to 7. Bryan finds a land and plays Crystal Shard, so getting some wheels spinning, but arguably...
It's a scary card. I mean, that's a real piece of power in this draft. But I think with his start compared to mine, I'm pretty happy to be in the spot and not terribly worried at the moment.
Yeah, having to take that one turn effectively off definitely could be huge to the momentum. Definitely is huge to the momentum. Could play a huge role in the game.
I passed with all of my mana untapped and a full hand of cards here, so I imagine some kind of play on my opponent's turn is going to happen here. But I was wrong. So
that looked like a shrug. Well, that's not worth dealing with, or something to that effect.
Well, especially with this Dragmangler. Oh God. Name of the card. Dragmangler, is it?
Duskmangler.
Yeah. Didn't sound right when I said it.
So yeah, discarding a card.
Yeah, you get to pick to discard, sack, or lose 4.
Bryan gets to do all 3. Lucky him.
And I think the choosing not to lose 4 when you're at 20 is maybe just a huge sign of strength. I mean, maybe just a sign that you have too many lands in hand, but...
Hard casting a Duskmangler, kind of at the point where I don't need all the extra lands, right?
I mean, in game 1, we saw you starting to battle back on, I think it was upwards of 10 mana, like, getting to spend most of it most turns.
blocking with our wall and bouncing it, showing some of the power here. I don't know that that is going to be fast enough to keep up with my plays at this point in the game, but in another game, that's a winning play a lot of the times. But it looks like I'm just going to rain down haymakers until he can't take it anymore.
Right. It's unfortunate that being green, a lot of your haymakers have trample, so crystal sharding a blocker doesn't actually get as much value.
Unfortunate for whomst, though.
Well,
So here's Behold the Unspeakable.
Accidentally moving over the Everflowing Chalice counter. There we go.
That's pretty unspeakable, so that makes sense. Crystal Shard also not very effective at bouncing your creatures either. When they do the things that they do when they come into play.
Right. I mean, of note, if Bryan hadn't bounced his own Wall of Omens last turn, he could have attempted to bounce at Scott's instep and then bounced on his turn to succeed. But the issue is that Scott also has 2 creatures that replaying is just high value. Here's a third one now that wouldn't, even if he could bounce it, wouldn't be favorable to do so.
Yeah, and what do you even want to bounce,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, definitely not favorable, even if he could Armageddon you. Well, at that point, maybe it's worthwhile, but...
Scrying here with Behold the Unspeakable keeps something on top, so...
Oh.
Keeps both on top?
Bryan had an interesting spot there. He switched his mana
both on top.
at that turn. He opted to keep planes up instead of a blue mana for Crystal Shard for much of the same reason there. Like, he's not going to want to bounce my creature, so he might as well represent his Swords to Plowshares. Or Dispatch, I guess. He only had 2 artifacts at the time, but...
Right, not yet online. Though it is online now.
Not really the cards you want to see in hand in this position, I think.
Standard wisdom is you have to take the removal spell here because taking either of the others is ineffective, and that's what he chooses to do.
But now he sees that if he puts any of my big creatures into my graveyard, I can just get them back immediately in a variety of ways. So
I mean, his 2 best removal spells being exile removal spells means he definitely has more of a way to battle against this than most people would. But if he doesn't have the cards, it looks like he does have the Dispatch. And dispatching the Worm and then continuously blocking the Mangler does mean we're stable.
Mm-hmm.
But at 8...
With an Artisan of Kozilek in hand as well.
Right. At least there's nothing for Artisan to get back,
Yeah.
though. Oh, interesting.
Also scary.
Right. I feel like, though, this line doesn't leave you any ability to block and charge your own creature as well, because if the plan was to do so on the Witch, it would be better to just play the Wall of Omens. And you can't really do so. Well, now you have to do so on the Sculler, but this is just going to represent too much damage coming in. Yeah, this is lethal, right?
Oh, we have Negate.
Negate, okay.
Crystal Shard, so...
Because if he had bounced his creature with Crystal Shard, you would have gotten back dismembered the Witch, and had lethal on the attack.
Right. But this still represents eating a creature because he needs to block at least something here.
Yeah, this is why I would have liked Wall of Omens more. Wall of Omens could either just bounce off the Skin Render, let him go to 1. How large is the Mangler? 5.
5.
So
5/4.
So yeah, the wall here bouncing off Skin Render would have been nice. Oh, interesting. I actually don't hate this line either, though I hadn't seen it initially.
I mean, he puts a creature into my graveyard.
Oh, true.
Reanimate spells here. While not useful at this moment, it does...
He has to play something to get in the way, and...
We know that this thing is flipping, so he's getting a creature from Vision.
But also not a particularly scary creature.
Yeah.
Not big, he doesn't have a ton of cards, and I have a Skin Render in my graveyard.
It looked like that turned into a pretty good draw from this position, although I'm not sure whether it will be enough. So let's see if it's what I think it was. It looked like a Reflector Mage.
Well, Reflector Mage isn't really good here, right? Because even though Dusk Mantler Mangler couldn't get cast again right away, because Bryan's at 3, the turn after when it does get cast again, it's just lethal from its comes into play trigger.
Well, but we're dead from cards that are face up on the table right now, so Reflector Mage would have prevented that for a turn at least.
True, I guess, giving him a turn to draw a removal spell.
Yeah, like we have Dismember, and we know that there was
Artisan to bring back.
Or Artisan, yeah.
Yep. So Scott's into game just too powerful, and it looked like a ton of ramp to ramp it out. So Scott, how did you end up doing overall in that draft?
Okay, yeah. So my powerful endgame actually ended up working in 3 of my matches. I ended up losing to Matt, as we saw he was pretty fast and had some cheap counter magic that was too much to overcome. But I ended this draft at 3-1.
And from Bryan, he actually wasn't able to get his pieces together for most of that draft and ended up 1-3. So here we are with the matchup of Jacob and Bats. Bats was on a mostly green-red deck that is a lot of creatures, a lot of creature value, and a bit of a combo finish. We might get to see how that comes together, and I'll explain it as it happens. And then, Scott, do you want to speak to what Jacob was on?
Yeah, Jacob's playing just a mono white aggressive strategy. He's got some top end in Armored Ascension and Charge Across the Araba, but low curve, some small cheap interaction spells, but really just trying to get on the board fast and hit them hard before they can enact their game plan.
And there we see a promo version of Jiraga Tree Speaker. Wasn't familiar with that one until I saw it on the day. So we see a little bit of ramp, and looks like the choice was to leave whatever that card was on top with the Branch Walker.
Jacob's first play being on turn 3 is not, plan A for this deck. Not sure if there was a mulligan involved here, but
There was. Jacob was on 6 cards here, so
it's not the fastest start. However, if your first play's on turn 3, a Spectral is a decent place to be.
Right. I think I would take it as a sign of strength from Bats that he's willing to trade the Branch Walker for 2 of the spirits, allowing to effectively get an extra 1/3 value off of it on the trade just to clear a couple of those away. And here we see why Jacob chose not to take that deal. Is that Soltari can never keep them straight? Is that Champion?
Champion, yeah.
So going to make those spirits very real threats. This is almost a 2-turn clock from Jacob. Going to be swinging with 8 power of essentially unblockable next turn, but Bats has his own clock.
Now, if Jacob's last card is that Charge Across the Araba, a top deck Plains could give him the clean victory here. That is just a lot of power that Bats
True. And Jacob actually has 2 cards in hand, so he could already have it in that case. Armored Ascension also changes the math a little bit, but not enough.
Yeah, that Great Oak Guardian coming in, giving all of Andy's creatures +2/+2 there is kind of a beating.
Right, the Crater Hoof of Peasant Cube. It means that we're not facing as big an attack next turn. Armored Ascension would still be interesting here, as it would allow 1 creature to kind of hold back most of the forces. Ooh, but Day becomes Night as well on this passing of the turn. Hard to imagine Jacob has anything too impactful here. And I was wrong. We have another big pump creature putting counters this time on them and finishing off that game.
Not that it matters terribly much, but not attacking with your 2/2 shadow creature. Not my favorite play, but I guess it was just already resigned, taking the L there.
So game 2, we start off with Lawkeeper threatening to lock down any big plays, and here we see another shadow creature. So definitely a nice start compared to game 1, and currently not seeing a second color from bats yet. So there's a chance he might even be stuck off of his mana, even if he has the cards we're looking for the combo.
Plays Paradise Druid, but that's the only one, I guess.
Paradise Druid doesn't tap for red, though, currently, right?
It adds 1 mana of any color. It doesn't have a restriction.
Oh, okay. I, for some reason, thought that it did.
Still just making green mana, though, with it. Who needs red mana?
Right. Only, it looks like 4 or 5 red spells in Bats' deck, and the ones we were looking for the combo would be Rhythm of the Wilds or Grumgully, threatening to put +1/+1 counters onto Kitchen Finks for his sacrifice, which seems to only be Goblin Bombardment as I look at it here. But also, in this matchup, just a Kitchen Finks that can never truly die is already going to be all he would really need in this matchup, even if he doesn't draw that other little piece of the combo.
And this draw from me is much more in line with what he wants to do every game. I mean, he spent every bit of mana he has had every turn just curving out and disrupting his opponent even a little bit with that Lawkeeper. So he is very happy at the moment.
Red mana online for Andy Grumgully comes down, but you're right, he's under a decent amount of threat here.
Jacob is fairly wide, but most of his creatures aren't that threatening individually yet.
Right, and Bramblewood Paragon introducing an interesting interaction as Grumgully or Rhythm put +1/+1 counters on things. That gives anything with +1/+1 counter vigilance, or no, trample, excuse me. So definitely big threats, hard to block. Lawkeeper gonna tap something down here and threaten to tap something down on Jacob's turn. So a chance that Jacob can get in for a good amount of damage, or at least the blocks get difficult.
Reclamation Sage actually getting value here is nice.
Yeah, real unfortunate series there, though. Again, Bats is just at 8, facing down a shadow creature, so if he can't close it out soon, it will start to get dangerous. Should be able to get in for at least a little bit of damage here. And Jacob choosing to take it because he can tap down both blockers. Oh, or has some other effect. This is why we see him choose not to tap anything down. Needs the mana for White Mane Lion. Get to recur. So this helps a lot to get us blockers and help us survive long enough for Shadow Creature to close out this game. But still, all those creatures having trampled means the blocks aren't even that good at keeping them healthy.
Acidic Slime taking out the golem that's returned.
So drawing both effectively disenchant creatures this game has given Bats the value to have everything going on. Of note, I don't know if he forgot the Grumgully, or if we're still on the stack somewhere. It looks like we just forgot the Grumgully counter on Acidic Slime. Oh. Also, Grumgully Duskwatch Recruiter is a human and should not have a counter from Grumgully. So Acidic Slime should, and Duskwatch Recruiter shouldn't. A couple of Grumgully mistakes this game. Grumgully from one of the two sets we've had in the last few years that have said non-human creature and made a lot of small interactions a bit awkward.
Duskwatch Recruiter's counter is from the Paragon. It's a warrior.
Oh, okay. I completely missed that.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'd even pointed out the Paragon earlier, but so much just focusing on Grumgully for specifically the reason of this card we're seeing, as Bombardment would give him the combo if he has the Kitchen Finks.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about the Paragon at all until you pointed out that Recruiter wouldn't have gotten a counter.
Yeah. Heads up there. Acidic Slime still should have one.
Yeah, correct.
Bombardment not able to answer the Priest, so it looks like Bats is going to have one more draw at it. Definitely doesn't look like he's ready to present lethal in any way. And
We'll have a Duskwatch activation too. I guess potentially two of them, one on end step and one on our turn.
true.
Although I
and
guess if Duskwatch is going to flip...
But Duskwatch at end of turn also threatens to find one of our... Well, could have found one of the team pump creatures that could have possibly threatened lethal as well. So
Interested
here,
if we... Yeah, we do. Okay.
activating with the transform trigger on the stack.
And Jacob, unfortunately, following up his great opening with just an absurd amount of lands here for this mono-white strategy.
Right, but still looks like it's going to be good enough. Oh, of note, he didn't even need a land for Kitchen Finks because, of course, the flipped version would make it cost one less. So if he did find Kitchen Finks, he didn't even need the land to be able to do it. I wonder if Jacob's doing this in upkeep. That would be a really heads-up play for him to do so, even though he knows it's unlikely that the Kitchen Finks was their last turn. Still could be the draw this turn.
He does know that we have... that Bats has Bloodbraid Elf in hand, so it's pretty heads up to keep him off of that unless he has another land, which he's missed for a couple turns.
But always could draw that, so it's not even just the combo that shuts off.
Right. Yeah,
And
so just pack him in there.
Yep, just the strength of Shadow. As we get into the third game, we see Bats already has his colors online in case he does draw one of those red splash cards we saw last game, Bloodbraid Elf, Goblin Bombardment. We saw Rada put into hand off of the Duskwatch activation. Here's that Paragon that caused me a bit of confusion last game, and another warrior in Rada. So, very quick development from Bats this game. The Priest would have a lot of work to do if it was on its own this time again. But Journey to Nowhere takes out the Paragon. Seven off of that land drop. But just getting in for 3. Still plenty of mana to have a follow-up here. And we see I'm actually not familiar with that card. I don't think it was in his main deck. I'm not seeing it here. That is one of the werewolves I know, but not something that was in the
That's
main deck.
Halana. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 2. When you do, target creature deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. Or that creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature.
An interesting one to see come in out of the sideboard here. Definitely makes sense since all of his creatures are much bigger than Jacob's creatures. The Lawkeeper, especially causing a little bit of issues last game. The Spirits from game 1. And even a way to get rid of the shadow creatures,
Right,
presumably the most important reason why it's been brought in. Mm-hmm. Well, and even the champion, it's not like Bats is playing that many red spells, only really the bombardment that could answer it, and throwing away 2 of his guys to kill it. Definitely not super appealing. Here we see the Kitchen Finks and the pay 2 to have it deal damage and kill the shadow creature, just as we were talking about. And Jacob really on the back foot here.
Sultari Priest has got a tough road ahead of him.
Yeah, it was awkward. Mom had activated to, it looked like, absorb some damage in combat, which meant it wasn't able to protect the champion from the fight post-combat. So it's really just the amount of pressure Bats is putting him on that he wasn't able to prevent getting kind of blown out by the Huntmaster just getting to snipe something off for free.
Sunblessed Guardian joining Jacob's team.
That's one of the other transform creatures. Jacob definitely got a lot of mana, and we only see Rhythm of the Wild and, if I'm not mistaken, no other cards in hand from Bats. So if Jacob manages to stabilize, I'm surprised we're not seeing a tap down. Yeah, Jacob's maybe pulling us back to beginning of combat to tap down something. Rada makes sense.
Important to note that Rhythm of the Wilds also gives us Kitchen Finks forever.
Correct. So no good blocks here on the Kitchen Finks besides just absorbing damage. It's why Bats had to play it first, though. So presumably this is a block. Probably an incorrect block, though, as all it manages to achieve is untapping the...
Oh, and it can activate Halana when it comes back.
Jacob definitely just missed this interaction entirely.
Yeah.
Should have just blocked the Halana and just not taken that damage. Pretty hugely reverses the position now, as Jacob was going to be stable, just tapping down some creatures. If he taps down on his turn, it seems like Lawkeeper needs to be tapped. Yeah, this attack is not for nearly enough. I guess, does he have the mana to transform? I don't remember how much that creature costs to transform.
It's 3, but I'm not sure that he has the Coven that he needs, because the Priest and the Guardian are both 2.
Oh. No, sorry, I meant the Phyrexian transform card.
Oh, those are sorcery abilities, but yeah, he can flip it. It's 5 in a Phyrexian red. Oh, Jacob just packs it in there, yeah.
I missed that it was sorcery speed. Yeah, getting blown out by the Kitchen Finks coming back. It looked like he didn't draw anything either, and Bats was ahead on board, but making that misstep the turn before put him too far behind there. And so we saw there that Bats had very aggro start, but always able to have the combo finish. His creatures were able to get larger than most of the other creatures we've seen in these matches, so not a surprise to learn that Bats ended up being 3-1 in that draft, only losing to Scott, who we saw had much bigger creatures, so seemingly wasn't able to get the combo off in that matchup, and that was the only match he ended up losing.
And unfortunately, Jacob never really managed to cobble anything together, at least not enough games in a row, and finished this draft at 0-4.
So that will wrap up our second draft out of 5, the Peasant Cube Draft. Just for a quick recap of the overall standings after that draft. We've got Bats and Matt at 6 and 2, Scott at 5 and 3, Derek and Joey with 4 wins and 4 losses, Jacob and Bryan at 3 and 5, and Prose at 1 and 7. Next up will be the Synergy Cube Draft, so keep an eye out for that coming soon. If you are interested in any more info about any of our drafts or the league in general, feel free to check out the links in the info panel for all of our socials, Discord, etc. Thank you again for watching, and we hope to see you again next time.